Welcome to the Money Guy Stacked Edition.
It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
You caught me with that.
Do you want to start over?
No, that's good.
So here's the thing.
We're rolling.
As y'all can see, this is not Bo Hansen.
Upgrade.
Anybody who knows the wonderful world of broadcasting and personal finance knows Joe Saul Seha.
I'm so happy to be here. I can't believe I'm with all of you. It's so great to be here, Brian. Thank you.
So I feel like I need to set the stage for you, though, Joe, because you and I, we are old friends in the fact that you are part of my informal, when I go to conferences, I call you my unofficial conference mastermind group because well, think about this, because every time I go to a conference, whether it's Podcast Movement, FinCon, usually it's either you or Steve Stewart that I don't know how you do it, but y'all are like the first people I ever see. And then when I come home, if I'm trying to come up with 3 ideas to try to implement in my show going forward, you've got one of those slots pretty much every year. And I'm not trying to just throw stuff at you, but it is one of those things where I come back always and I'm like, team, this is what we need to be doing. I learned this from Joe. And you, I think it's because you and I are so similar in that you've been a long-term podcaster. You have Stacking Benjamins that you do with Josh. Y'all are super successful, a lot of industry recognition, a lot of awards. I think y'all have even put on your website, y'all are no longer accepting award nominations because y'all have won too many of them at this point. It is. It's like written in the bio.
If somebody wants to give us an award,
you don't want any more Lifetime Achievement Awards
we're like,
and that type of stuff.
Stop, please.
But you also have 16 years as being a financial advisor, so that says a lot because you're somebody who's actually worked in the trenches. You have your own successful life as well. So there's a lot of depth to the knowledge. And then what I was so excited to find out when we were at the last FinCon, you had shared, I got a book coming out. And it's I know how hard that process is. And you did it through Penguin Random House, so it's one of the big publishers. And you got me so excited about it. I was like, you got to come on the show. And we don't do guests. Anybody who's watching the show, you guys know we're not a big guest drop-off place, but I think enough of Joe that I wanted to have him on the show so you guys could learn kind of what I learn when I go to all these conferences.
Well, thank you. I'm very grateful for all that.
I want to talk to you. This book's stacked. So, you can, and feel free to drop any of the Stacking Benjamins. And I also want to thank your mom for letting you out of the basement. I know that's not the easiest thing to get away so you can do this road show and talk about the book.
I think she's happy to fumigate the place.
But it is one of those things where when I was going through your book, it starts in the beginning, like in a basic level. So it's very approachable for anybody that's out there. But then you go pretty deep with the knowledge. So it kind of captures anybody and everybody who's interested in money. How did you kind of decide? Did you know who your audience, or did you want a wide net like you created?
I wanted a book that I would read. And I wanted a book that kind of went along with what we do on Stacking Benjamins, which, as you mentioned, is kind of campy fun, right? Yeah. Mixed with some heavy-duty financial planning topics. And I was wandering around this wonderful bookstore in Portland called Powell's. I don't know if you've ever been to Powell's. And the bookstore, Brian, is a whole block long.
Right.
And what they did was kind of like your studio here, which is where as people next to you moved out, they took over their space.
Okay.
And so you can tell when you go from building to building inside Powell's because they blew out a wall and the second floors don't even line up, right? So it's this crazy place, which is what we love about bookstores, and you just kind of get lost. So anyway, I'm wandering around the bookstore and I end up in the kids section and I saw this book, The Hardy Boys Detective Manual.
Okay.
Which, when I was in 4th grade, I carried this manual around with me, my little brother and I. We carried it everywhere, and it was written with the help of a real life retired FBI agent.
Right.
Like, this was the real deal. So my dad would leave for work on a muddy day, like we kind of have today, on a muddy day, and my brother and I would go, we'd look at the tire tracks, so we could tail the bad guy. My mom would touch a door handle and we're there with tape, like getting the
trying to get the fingerprints.
Get the fingerprints.
Yeah.
And we dog-eared this thing. We took it everywhere. And I had this germ of an idea that I wanted a book for adults about money that I loved as much as I loved that book, that I could refer to no matter what stage I was in. But that didn't really that was kind of the germ. I got home and my mom has a key to our house. Okay. Not only do we have a key to her basement, but to our house. And she's left me this box of stuff. By the way, I was 50 years old at this point. 50 years old. She's finally letting me have this sixth place bowling trophy from the father-son bowling thing my dad and I had, and one of the legs is broken off.
All parents do this, by the way. They just start bringing stuff and clearing out their closets.
You can't trust me with this until I'm 50. The Little League stuff. But in there was the Cub Scout Wolf Guide.
Yeah.
And the Wolf Guide, and we talk a lot about gamification. People, you and Bo and OG and I, we talk about gamification really helps. It makes it easier if you turn it into a game. And man, I realized looking at this again as an adult, they were these early people gamifying stuff for kids to get them interested. And every achievement starts off with things you need to do, things you're going to need, tools you're going to need, and then succinctly, how do you do it? And then at the end, check boxes of, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And then there's a place for your mom to sign it. Yeah. So Stacked was born. It's a list of achievements starting very basic at the beginning and then tough achievements at the bottom. And at the end of every chapter, as you saw, you check the boxes and then there's a spot for your mom to sign.
So here's two compliments. Well, first, I went through all the Cub Scout stuff, got the Arrow of Light, so I knew exactly. I caught the concept very quickly because that's what did drive me to get more merit badges and other things. But here's the compliment. We came back from Podcast Movement, and FTE Daniel, when we came back, he goes, hey, I got to get a copy of Joe's book because he goes, that concept sounded perfect for me. And I mean, it was unasked for. It was right there with like in what he was looking for. And what I like is it's approachable. You use humor because I think creating content in the personal financial space can get dry, very dry, and you need to keep it interesting. Sense of humor works. And I wanted to ask you, because we've done so many shows on like optimism, humor, and other things. Every one of your shows has that built into it. Where's that come from? I mean, because you're an MC at most events I go to, so that means that it's not just you that thinks you're funny. Other people think you are. How did you get into that racket of first being interested in humor, but then also kind of turning that into what drives a lot of your content?
Well, like you and Bo, we are teachers.
Yeah.
And I think as a teacher, you have to make sure that some of these concepts, to your point, people think that they're boring. Yeah. People don't understand them. I read a report recently that said that over 150 million people report in the United States that they've cried about their money. I believe the number's almost 35% of millennials have posted stuff to Instagram that make them look more wealthy because they feel that pressure to appear something like they're not. And so there's so many people crying, they're struggling, they've got there's so many reasons to be down that if we're not up and we're not that voice that says that you can do this no matter where you are, that who's going to be? Yeah. I think everybody needs that in their life. They need somebody who's pushing them on one end, but on the other end, showing them the top of the hill that, there was a day in my life, Brian, when, and this is early in my financial planning career, where I had this old minivan. I had no credit. Yeah. I'm teaching other people about their money though. So this is how scary this really was early in my career. I'm teaching other people about their money and I'm doing none of the stuff myself.
Yeah.
I ran out of gas on the way home. I had no credit. I borrowed money from family already. I couldn't go to anybody. I was underneath the seats of my car and I'm looking and I found 85 cents in my car so that I could walk half a mile to a gas station. By the way, I had to beg this dude to give me the plastic gas container. He didn't want to give me the gas container because he thought I was going to steal it.
Yeah.
And so, why did I steal a gas container? I don't know, but he didn't want to give it to me. And I remember I cried that day.
Yeah.
I thought I was completely screwed. So optimism is, the book is funny, not just because we're trying to be funny. And I'm not funny just to haha, let's have some games. It's really because if we can't make this approachable for people that were where I was, then we're missing out.
Yeah, and I like the fact that because you do, I don't know if it's confessional, but you're very open about that in the book as well, is that you've had mistakes. And it's one of those things where I think that makes it very approachable when you can be honest, vulnerable, and that opens people up to come in and go on the journey with you. So part of the Money Guy Show is that I like to say we go beyond common sense. And you do. I want to kind of dive with. I still want everybody to buy the book, but I also want to give a little bit of the wisdom and knowledge that you shared.
Yeah,
in
or
there.
if you're where I was, just get it from the library.
Yeah, so you can.
If you're thinking for 85 cents, your library is good. That'll be fine.
But let's talk about, because there were a few nuggets in here that I did want to cover. The first thing is, because one of the first things, if you've ever gone to therapy, they'll talk to you about controlling that inner voice, and the questions you ask yourself. And you kind of, in the very beginning of the book, you ask yourself, what questions are you asking yourself? Because so many people are focusing on comparing themselves to others. What are some of those big questions that people should be first to make sure their mindset's right on the wealth journeying process?
Well, and to your point, the number one question I'm sure that you and Bo get in your practice that I used to get when I was practicing was, how am I doing versus everybody else?
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
The big question I would ask when I would go to companies and I'd talk about like using their benefits, people would say, okay, how much should I put in the 401k? And my first question was always this crazy question that nobody could answer. Where are you going?
Yeah.
Like, where do you want to be? And then they'd say, well, okay, I want to retire at 60 or 62. Well, what size bag of money do you need to get? Like, how much do I need to put away today to get to that point? And it's funny because people could never answer that question. But it seems so basic to all of us, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That if I want to know where I'm going, I need a roadmap, and it should be, I need X amount of money times Y return to get to the goal.
Yeah.
And what's cool, by the way, about this very simple equation, so much money times so much return to get the goal, is that this powers some of the most kick-ass conversations, man.
Yeah.
It's so many exciting things. Like, I have all these different goals on this timeline I want to get. Let's say that I want to put I have twins that are 16. You've got kids.
Yeah.
If you want to, I said my kids are 16, they're 26.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was
like,
like,
whoa, wait
your
a minute.
kids are older than mine, and I have an
Yeah.
18-year-old, so keep going.
My kids are 26. In my head, they'll always be 16, or maybe even younger than that. But anyway, but I had, putting twins through college and my own retirement goals or financial independence goals even. Maybe people out there want a second house, or they want more flexibility in their life. Whatever these goals are, when you put them on the timeline, the first thing that you were able to see is, how do they compete against each other? And when you find out how much each of these goals cost, Brian, as you know, we can have a great discussion about there might not be enough money for all those.
Yeah.
So which one's more important? Is it more important for me to pay 100% of my kids' college and get retirement when I want it? Or would it be better for me to help my kids maybe pay for 20% of the college and I get to retire? Or maybe retirement's not that important to me and I will pay for all of college and I'll retire a little later.
You said something there that I think I want to go, because I think you take it for granted, but I want to back up and make sure that everybody listening heard it. A lot of financial advisors, the first homework they'll give you is just say, list your goals, because that's kind of that why that you're talking about. But as you just went through with kids in college, the desire to retire, whether you start stacking in the new car purchases and other things, you can get overwhelmed with all these goals. I thought you did something very unique, and I wanted to give you a chance to talk about it. You said just writing down your goals is not good enough. You need to put a timeline with it, because I think this is where we're so similar, because I always talk about financial order of operations. That's one of our key brands that we do. But when you put a timeline, it makes it so much more digestible. Talk a little bit about that, because that way people don't get overwhelmed with trying to absorb all this at once. Because finances, that's when people go on the sideline and quit doing it. So I wanted to talk about, because I thought that timeline strategy was very important.
Well, here's what I like. We've talked to quite a few people in neurology and working with the brain. And most of us, the vast majority of people are visual. I'm actually not as visual. I'm audio, which is why I love, audio podcasting.
Right.
But still, even when I lay stuff out, even as a guy who's visual second, audio first, when I lay it out and I can see it against everything against each other versus just goal 1, goal 2, goal 3, and here's the things. I begin, my inner brain starts working on these things. My subconscious brain starts working on it. And it also avoids another problem that you and I see all the time, which is that if I've got a goal here, and I've got a goal here, and I got another goal here, and I'm sitting right here, the only goal I focus on is this first one, because I can't see past that mountain.
Yep.
And the bad news is that you and I know compounding interest is so awesome that if we're going to let our money make some money for us, I think that one of the cool things Robert Kiyosaki talks about is you try to build this pile of money that goes to work every day with a lunch pail.
Yeah.
And not only am I going to work, but my money's going to work at the same day. And when I can get to the point that my money's doing all the work and I'm not doing any work and I'm sitting back, like that's fantastic. Yeah. But for this goal out here, we've got enough time that I can send my money to do a bunch of that work while I focus my time on this goal. So by timelining the goals and having them all set out, I can have a strategy about this one, and this one, instead of, well, I work on this one and oops, guess what? Now I've got this huge mountain here for the second one, then oops, I've got a huge mountain here for the third one. And for people listening on the audio podcast, they have no idea what I just did there, but
but what you're really saying is make it digestible, because I think with the timeline, with what you described in the book, because it can get overwhelming, especially, and you even make this example, is that if your retirement was like, say you needed $2 million saved up.
Yeah.
That sounds, if you're starting out from day one, that sounds like, how in the world am I going to get to $2 million?
Right.
It just seems unattainable. But if you start breaking out through the timeline and knowing which objective needs to be first, it's one brick at a time, I think is the way you put it in the book. I thought that was really helpful because people get so overwhelmed when they're trying to figure out their goals and the why. And that leads me to my next thing.
Well, before we get to that, do you mind?
Yeah.
Because there's one other big thing here, which you and I also see people get overwhelmed with all the time. And it's that there's this huge range of investment options out there.
Yeah.
And how the hell do I choose from all these investment options what to do? Well, if I start off with timelining my goal, it'll give me, once again, the amount I need to save, but it also gives me this rate of return I need.
Yeah.
And while there's all of these investments, this huge range of investments out there, I can now, instead of knowing everything about everything, if I start off with these goals, I can now laser focus in on the few goals that historically, based on this amount of time till the goal and that rate of return I need, as you know, that takes this wide range and makes it very narrow. And now I only got to know about a few things instead of everything. And I can be much more confident that I'm going to make it to the goal versus, what people usually do, like which cryptocurrency is going to get me there.
Yeah, well, it lets you put it, short-term money, is going to make you a little bit like cash. The midterm goals are going to let you be a little more aggressive. And then those long-term goals, maybe you can do the 8 to 10%.
Yes.
That's great, because I think a lot of times people, they need that clarity. And as you mentioned, visually, or at least grouping it organizationally, that's powerful stuff.
Because the concept of what's best has got to drive you crazy.
Yeah, and that's what. So I want to kind of get into some of the nuts and bolts of, now that we know the why, we know the goals. The first place people have to do is you have to have that margin. You actually have to be able to live on less than you make. And the only way you can live on less than you make is if you actually know what you're spending stuff on. And that's where, and I'm going to say the dreaded word that nobody likes to talk about, budgeting.
Oh, man.
But, man, you dropped, I got to tell you, I even told the content team, I was like, Joe dropped a just knowledge bomb on something, because we just sent out on social media, we're talking about net worth stuff a lot because we're quickly approaching year end right now. And net worth is an important thing. And when we put out on social media, hey, tell us what your relationship with net worth is, a lot of people said, I'm doing Mint. I'm done. I got it. I've checked the box. Give me my merit badge. If we're doing this stack style, and that's just, you talked about, and I want to give you a point to talk about the difference between budgeting versus tracking.
Yes. And Mint is tracking.
Yeah.
And Mint can be fantastic tracking. And it can teach you about things that you shouldn't do in the future. So I can go back through my tracking and for tracking purposes, I don't use Mint. I actually use the Marcus Insights.
Okay.
Which I like to. Another free thing, just to give people a couple choices out there of things to use. I have no relationship, by the way, with that company. Just let people know. It's just what I use. I very much enjoy it. But when I go back through my Marcus Insights, which used to be Clarity Money, Cheryl and I can very quickly see what mistakes we made last month. But those mistakes are already made. They're done. They're buried. What I really need is something that ahead of time will prevent me from making those mistakes in the first place. And an example that we use in the book, my co-author Emily Guy Birkin and I, we talk about Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson wrote down every expense that he had. He was fantastic at it. Anybody that knows history knows Thomas Jefferson owed everybody and their sister tons of money. He was so broke. He was so broke all the time.
He was in debt.
He was scrambling very much scrambling. Tommy J, as we call him. Our good friend Tommy J was scrambling. But by budgeting ahead of time, instead of writing down the mistakes that I made, which is good, budgeting is, how do I set up a system so I don't make that mistake in the first place? And there's a few things out there. You know, a lot of people use YNAB as an example, something like that, or Cube Money, who's a sponsor of our show, or Dave Ramsey's Every Dollar, right? These envelope budgeting systems, very simply, you put money in a spot ahead of time. It gives that money a purpose before you spend it. And then you have this little timeout when you take money out of that envelope, however the technology works, just this little spot where, do I really need to spend money on this? Should I spend money on this? Yeah. And if you just build that circuit breaker in ahead of time and have some discussion, and frankly, I don't even know how much I like the budget, Brian.
Yeah.
As much as I like the conversations around budgeting.
Well, and we talk about that. Hopefully, if you do this long enough, you get some muscle memory. But what I look, I don't know if this makes me the old guy on the front porch yelling at young kids on the lawn, but it is one of those things where I think people, they think technology has completely relieved them of their obligation to be an active participant in this budgeting process. And that's what I loved in the book when you talked about the tracking versus budgeting, is because tracking, just because you downloaded an app, and you named off quite a few good ones there, you haven't finished the drill. You still have to, you can use that as a tool in the budgeting process, but you've got to be actively involved in it. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I mean, but so many people, 6 months ago, I downloaded that app and it's been running in the background. But if you're not actually keeping up with what's going on each month until you build that muscle memory, I don't think you actually are getting the benefits of what budgeting can do for your financial life.
I'll tell you what really helped Cheryl and I was my spouse, is that we had, and by the way, if you're watching us or listening and you're single, I like having an accountability partner. Somebody that you maybe go out to lunch with and you share a budget with, some trusted individual. Because I got to tell you, these conversations you have, when you say stuff out loud, once again, back to the brain, when I say stuff out loud, I internalize it. My brain hears me say it out loud, and then I'm much more likely to follow through. We had this problem in our family, which is that she and I, on the same day when we were struggling with money and we were trying to dig our way out of that initial hole that I said earlier we were in, we both come home with important things. She would come home with school clothes for the kids, and I'd come home with a video game. Both very important for our family.
A little off on the priority.
Very important. And we would have, in all capitals, the fight, right? The money fight, because I didn't know she was buying something. She didn't know I was buying something. And we would invariably break the budget because we hadn't talked. So the problem wasn't just the video game. The problem was the fact that we didn't talk. And the sad thing is, not in every relationship, but in most relationships that I saw, there were two different roles. One person knew where every penny was, and the other person's in a place we call fantasy land. And because I was so busy helping other people with their money, I was the person, frankly, that was in fantasy land.
So you were the plumber with the leaky pipes at home.
Absolutely. Yes. And so what really solved it wasn't the app. It wasn't the cool technology. To your point, we started having a weekly budget meeting. And here's the deal. We initially had this because, being a money nerd, I'm like, okay, we're going to do this professionally. We have it's going to be an hour-long meeting. It's going to be, we're going to do this point, this point, this point, this point. I got the spreadsheets out. We abandoned that in a hurry because it just didn't work. It wasn't fun. It was us, elongating those fights. Instead, all we needed was a quick check-in fairly frequently that would keep the money conversations alive, the little conversations, because I found that if we communicated on a scheduled basis once a week, not once a month or once every 6 months, but once a week, we had a check-in, we would then have these great conversations all week long that were impromptu. And so we decided to make it fun. It's 20 minutes long. Here's what we do. We do the tracking stuff. We look at the week before, all the stuff that we spent money on, and we go, and by the way, we found mistakes in our phone bill, right? We decided to level out our utilities. We did some of these really cool things because of the fact that we did the tracking piece. But on the budget front, we would then set up our money for the next week. So that's the second 10 minutes is setting up the money for the next week. And we would always do it to make it fun, either over pancakes or wine. depending on what time of day it was.
Well, I like what you just described is because the previous example, when you're talking about, you're so generous to Cheryl because you complimented her while cutting yourself down. But like Cheryl is thinking about the goals of the house with the kids and so forth when y'all were, raising the children, the twins. And then you were thinking about the video game. You had each were independent, thinking of different goals. When you have that open communication, I think it controls that inner voice that we all have. We all have a selfish streak inside of us. But if you're at least having these meetings as a couple, that voice now is united to where, and you'll find that the goals, because you kind of alluded to this earlier, I always talk about the invisible hand of how powerful your brain is if y'all are all united on the goal. You get there. It almost seems like, I don't want to say magical or spiritual, but it is an amazing thing where if you're united and you're tracking and you're building goals together, you will look back 3 to 5 years in the future and it happens. I mean, and then you get the fulfillment of doing it right and doing it well. And then it's, instead of the boring stuff like education supplies and just paying the bills, you can do the sexy stuff like the trips and all the other things that's good between couples.
No, it definitely takes that me and turns it into we, to use a Ted Lasso phrase.
Yeah, I love that show too. I think it fits our personalities. I want, if I could grow a mustache and wear the same shirt as Ted,
totally see you
I would totally try to get everybody around here to think I'm Ted. We could just have this whole thing. I've already adopted, like we got Nate the Great working the video over there. I am trying to be the best version of Ted Lasso. It would not be a stretch, by the way. It would not be a stretch. So I'm going to ask some these are questions that they serve us well, but I think that I would be crazy to not take advantage of the fact that you have 16 years of being a financial advisor, but you're out of the game. You are no longer now. Your partner on Stacking Benjamins, Josh, is a financial advisor, so I don't mind sharing that. But you have a whole chapter in the book talking about hiring an advisor who won't bleed you dry. I mean, what's because that's something I think a lot of people, and with your unique perspective that you were in it, but you're out of it, but you work in the personal finance space. Give us some general thoughts, and then we can kind of fine tune this too.
Well, and I'm going to say that some people, when I start talking about advisors, because I was one, they get shields up.
Yeah,
like,
of course,
here comes
trying to get
advisor.
my wallet.
Yeah, here comes the advisor pitch.
Yep.
Number one, not being one, first of all, but number two, I do look at advisors different, I think, Brian, than most people do when they talk about financial advisors. Like, the bad news is, as a guy who's gone from being in the financial planning game to now just doing the financial media side, some of the baloney conversations I see online about financial advisors and that you don't need one is ridiculous.
Right.
It is absolutely ridiculous. And here's the reason I say this. And once again, I'm not a financial advisor. I don't have a firm. I will tell you this. I don't want Earl from Peoria, who spends all day on Facebook, having an opinion about what to do with I mean, it's okay if Earl has an opinion, but I don't know if Earl can zip up his pants. And Earl is busy making sure that I follow every piece of advice, and he gets angry if I don't. Right? Versus people that I know who know me and know my goals. I want to be the dumbest person in a room. I need to have people that I respect around me. Frankly, for me, I need people that will fight with me. Because I'll get on my high horse and say, hey, I know that. And the question isn't, by the way, do I know it? The question is, and my advisors do this to me all the time, like, Joe, we know you know this. You're not doing any of it. Like, you're seriously doing nothing. So I need people that are going to push me. I had a friend tell me recently, he said, I need people who believe in me more than I believe in myself around me.
Well, we had previously talked about, because there's two of you in this relationship, this financial household, you and Cheryl. And you said in the book you talked about you need Gordon Ramsay to yell at you, and get in your face. But, Cheryl needs something completely different. And especially you being such a financially minded person, it's probably good to have that third party that bridges the gap. And then here's what I loved in the book also. You shared all the other service providers you hire. And I found myself nodding my head through the whole thing is like, I have a personal trainer. I have currently a physical therapist that's helping me with some back issues that I pay a fortune to. And then I have a I come from I did 16 years of public accounting. So I have a background. I even had a tax practice that I sold a tax business. And I thought for sure, because I had a 3-year commitment to hire this CPA firm that had bought my firm, and that was it. And then I thought for sure I'd pick up the habit of start doing my tax. I still overpay and get my taxes done by a professional.
I do too.
Because even with that background, because it's everything you talked about. It was an accountability and made it work. Talk about, because there are people out there, Susie Ormans and others, who say you don't need this.
Yeah, and think about this. If you think about yourself as a company, if you think about, let's take, I'm a Detroit guy originally. Most of my career was in Detroit. Let's take Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors.
Yeah.
Mary Barra does not hire a bunch of people who know how to build cars and then she goes and does something else. Mary Barra still has to know a lot about cars herself. Mm-hmm. She still goes to all the car industry conferences. She knows what she's doing when it comes to it, but she still has, for each piece of the car, she's these engineers around her that are smarter than her about how the wheel, now I'm going to get into the end of my knowledge, how the wheels work.
Wheels, that's where it ends.
How do those wheels work? I need to know that. How the different pieces of the car work. Yeah. And these people, but she can't abdicate. And I think what people think of when they think of financial advisors is, I'm going to hire somebody and I abdicate the throne. You cannot. Yeah. You hire somebody. My thing when I was a financial planner, I would tell my clients, because they were smart people. I work with engineers, presidents, and vice presidents of companies. These people were hella smart. Yeah. And I would tell them, I'm like, 96% of what I do, you can do yourself. My job is to cover your blind spot, to tell you when you're full of it, and to push you to do the things that you tell me are important to you.
And accountability,
Absolutely.
For sure. My wife told me last night when we got home that she's hiring a personal organizer for the house. I actually got white with being petrified that meant it was good. Because, you need to do stuff, but the accountability on actually doing something you're not good at, and that's what I like to think financial advisors can do. Now, you put in there 3 questions that people can ask to really cut through the marketing material. Do you mind sharing some of that?
Yeah, no. The very basic questions that you need to ask people are, number 1, what type of people do you work with?
Yeah.
And if they answer you, by the way, that every single person looks like you, they're lying. They are totally lying.
They might be hungry.
Yes. But also remember that your goal is, there's no right or wrong answer to these questions. That what you're looking for is this back and forth of how are they going to respond to these? Who do you work with is a phenomenal question that I like. What licenses do you hold? Don't ask them, are you a CFP? Are you a fiduciary? But fiduciary is a hugely important question, but I would rather that they said it. And by the way, and this is something that's very important, there are people out there, as you know, saying they're a fiduciary and they're not.
Yeah. It's a slippery slope.
Well, and it's illegal.
Yeah. But if it's not written down, they can get away with about anything. Because it's hard to sue people.
Yes. Yeah. I want to see that in writing, that you're a fiduciary, meaning that you have to act in what you think is my best interest. I'll tell you another clue. If you're meeting with them face to face, or if you're working with their staff, one thing I found, because I visited a bunch of different financial planning offices, the receptionist is a huge clue. The person that answers the phone, if the receptionist is disgruntled, I went into a lot of financial planner offices. I will tell you, if the person answering the phone acted disgruntled, didn't have the time of day for you, was not really very inviting, all that comes from the boss. And the boss is probably not great to work with. In fact, in my experience, and I've been in hundreds of financial planner offices, every time that happened, the financial planner themselves was a jerk. Was just a total jerk.
Now I'm replaying as you walked into our office and you met Allie.
They all hated you.
How were they? Did they welcome you with a warm smile? And because that's terrifying. But that's actually great insight, because it lets you see what the culture of the place is.
And if the advisor's answering the phone, if they don't have people around them to do the little things, your advisor is part of your brain trust.
Yeah.
Meaning you want them dealing with these big, heady issues that you're coping with. And sometimes, as you know, they're not as much money issues as they are you meeting money. Like, how am I coping with money, or how am I pushing myself to do more with my money? Versus opening a Roth IRA could probably be somebody else who's on the team that can help you fill out that paperwork or navigate the website or whatever that is. If they're doing all that stuff for you, you got to wonder how many people they're doing that for as well. So some is also looking at the operation and how they work.
And how much they're investing in the technology and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
Because it is, you want it in this modern world, you want to take advantage of all the convenience that come from that too.
Absolutely. But which also means to me, Brian, means to me too, that I want an advice. I had clients that always wanted to call me for everything.
Yeah.
You don't want to call your advisor for everything. You want your advisor to have a team that will handle all the little things. And I want to talk to the advisor's team for the little things. I want to talk to my advisor about the big stuff. I want my advisor to be constantly out there reading, getting knowledgeable. Like think about, once again, if you're the CEO like Mary Barra is at GM, I don't want that. I don't want that engineer who's dealing with the wheels trying to figure out his email or answering something about, some supplier issue. I want them figuring out what's the latest technology that we can all take advantage of.
Yeah, and that's what you could probably and we'll move on to the next thing, but most financial advisors are sales folks. And I'm always amazed at how many people are actually trying to get the next client versus becoming the masters of financial planning. And that's unfortunately how the majority of this industry is set up.
Yeah, that's a whole different episode, man.
So let's talk, because you did talk, because you gave away some free tidbits on investing earlier, but the book is set up for not only beginners, but it does go deep in some areas too. And I wanted to kind of bring this around because we have a lot of financial mutants that will watch this and they'll say, hey, what is Joe's thoughts on investing and other things? And there was a chapter that grabbed me. You have a chapter called How to Get Rich Quicker. And I was like, wait a minute, this is the opposite of where we're telling people how we do this. And so I had to ask you, because you mentioned about diversification, how there is things that you can do to accelerate your wealth creation, pretty much at the expense of diversification. So I wanted to ask you point blank, are you a fan of diversification?
I am very much a fan of diversification. And actually, my goal writing that chapter is, if we don't put that chapter in the book, people are wondering why. If I make it sexy, how to get rich quicker, it's the same way that people would always phrase the question to me, how do I do this faster, right? I mean, you can tell, and just as two creators online, when we have an episode with a sexy title, we get a big bump.
It's called clickable titles. It's not clickbait, it's clickable.
But we get a big bump, and I know that bump doesn't come from the general money guy family. It comes from people that are looking to cherry pick the get rich quicker. That's who is cherry picking the episodes versus your core audience, which are there for every episode and they want to learn along with you as you're going along the journey. So. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to ask because this ties into exactly what you're talking about, but you even have a call out section in there. And I felt convicted by this because I'm an entrepreneur. I have these businesses with the content creation, the financial planning firm. You called out Dave Ramsey saying he's built his wealth not through diversification. What did you mean by that?
Well, here's broader, and I'll get to Dave Ramsey, but broader, you can get rich quicker. And the way to get rich quicker, and most CFPs won't tell you this, is that what you do is you under-diversify. Yeah. And my goal here, by the way, Brian, was actually when you finish the chapter, you realize that you can get rich quicker, but you could also get poor quicker. Yeah. Getting rich quicker is one thing you can do, but it always comes with a downside. And what it, in technical terms, is just increase your standard deviation, and to do that, we either buy smaller companies. So we go from buying big companies, which are stable and are going to move with the market, to smaller companies that are going to do whatever they do. Yeah. A small company is either going to hella succeed or it's going to be, pushing daisies fairly soon. So you're going to have this swing versus this. And I point out Dave Ramsey because Dave Ramsey talks a lot about diversification as one of the baby steps, right? Buy these diversified mutual funds. And by the way, that is great advice.
It is good advice.
But that doesn't make you rich. What made Dave Ramsey, that makes you responsible. What makes you rich is Dave Ramsey didn't do that. He created one company. It was a little tiny company and it did very, very well. So if you want to get rich quicker, cut your diversification, buy riskier stuff.
Now, I want to give a counterpoint though on something, because I do agree with you. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, and you're exactly right. Is that a lot of, and I tell this because I had like a telecom person. He puts fiber into the ground, and one day he was like, "Brian, why would I give you an extra $25,000 when I can go put another line crew out by buying this one piece of equipment?" And I looked at him and I said, "You know what? You're exactly right. I mean, if you've got a small business that you can go invest this and it will give you this return, you ought to go do that, but just make sure you're building enough diversification or income outside or assets outside the business that allows." But you're exactly right. But I do want to, because I don't want our audience to watch this and go, the only way you can get rich is through starting a business, entrepreneurship, because there's a whole group of people out there on social media and on YouTube that are trying to say, if you buy my system or get into real estate, I can teach you how to be rich. But I got to tell you from personal experience, and I bet you're the same way, I can show you teaching couples where both husband and both spouses are teachers and educators that just a little bit over time stacked up and it turned into wealth. I mean, it's slow and steady. Does work, but when Joe is not wrong in the fact that under diversification or entrepreneurship, but he said something very key there. It also is a much higher likelihood of failure.
Absolutely. And frankly, what I hope people do when they come out of that chapter, Brian, is come out kind of where we are, that there is clearly a middle ground.
Yeah.
For me, 95% of my net worth is in responsible, growth-oriented investments to grow our family wealth, right? And then 5% is this stuff that I'm playing with. That is my go, go, go. And I'm investing in small companies. I'm investing in these things that might do really well. But I'm mitigating that risk on my end. I'm not putting every dollar I have in it, because the downside of getting rich quicker is getting poor quicker.
You had kind of closed out the chapter with, you cut through the noise and you said, focus on what you can control. Mm-hmm. What did you mean by that?
I meant that so many people focus on, and we play Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
We focus on, how come the market's not doing this?
Yeah.
What's going on in Washington, right? Is this mega backdoor Roth IRA stuff really going to survive or not? And, CNBC just had a piece saying, this is something for rich people. And I rolled my eyes. But anyway.
Especially the backdoor Roth conversions. You don't have to be rich to take advantage of those things.
Drives me crazy. And by the way, on a total, since we're on this tangent, why the hell if I'm in a 401k, I can put so much money in a 401k now, over $20,000 next year. Well, what, $21,000 next year? Why is a Roth IRA contribution still only 6?
Yeah.
Like, really? Why? We talk about people being left behind. How come those people can't put 21,000 into a Roth? But anyway,
I could go in that. Look, there's a lot of things.
Yes.
And if we're looking for Washington to give us our answers, that's why we don't do religion, we don't do politics, because I know that those things change like the wind in the seasons. But we definitely, you can focus on what you can control.
That is exactly the point. And that's why we don't do any of that stuff. Because you see how mad I got right there? I can't do anything about it, though. I can get mad about my credit card debt. I can get mad about Cheryl emphasizing school clothes over my video game. Like, what the hell? I get mad about, I can control all that stuff. I can't control what goes on in Washington.
We're going to put a cuss jar for the next time we have guests here, because I've already counted 4, maybe 5, that I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to play this with Nate the Great on post edits, on if we're going to put a horn on there or what.
I'll tell you what we do. We just beep it.
Well, let me ask you, because I want to ask one more closing question, and then I want to give all the information so everybody can look up Joe. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I do think it's somebody who's been doing this as long as you have, both from the financial planning, but then also content creation. I always think about there's usually like 3 things. Most, like when I go to a conference, I can retain about 3 things. And that's why I always try to be very careful that I think of 3 measurable goals that I want to have coming out of a conference. I think the human brain doesn't want to grab much more than 3. If there were 3 components to wealth creation that you would like people to know, or what you consider foundational, what would those 3 things be? It can be anything.
Yeah. No, I think the first thing is that we focus on so many things. We think that the reason that we're not getting ahead to the point that we just talked about is because of Washington, or because of what my boss did or didn't do, what happened with the weather, with all these things. behavioral stuff is the key to your success. I see people online focusing on, no, it's all index funds and avoiding fees. It's all, and don't get me wrong, avoiding fees can be a big win.
Yeah.
Paying fair fees can be a big win, but that's not the dragon people are losing on. During my 16 years, I saw people using high expense ways and still becoming wealthy, still building wealth. It's not the way I would have told them to do it, but they still were able to do it that way. It's the behavior.
Yeah.
It's setting up saving. It's focusing on what I can control. That's number one. How do I set things up so I win? Number two is people talk about discipline all the time. I think discipline's kind of overrated. I think what's underrated is automation. I think if you set things up so you don't have to think about it, here's what I want. Once again, going back to Mary Barra, CEO, as the CEO, I want to focus on the big stuff and how am I going to make my life better and do more stuff. I want to have money, when I identify an opportunity, automatically go to the right place. And avoid the wrong place, right? So I want to have systems built in that I don't have to think about all the little things. I can keep my head on the big picture and the money machine's rolling, which means whenever I identify something that's good, let's say that I save some money on my phone bill by going with the new provider. I then have a system where the next time I look at that is a year later or 6 months later, or whatever it is, and it's already in my system. Every 6 months, look at my phone bill. You know, I'm not giving myself discipline as much as I'm building a system to take advantage of that. That's number two. Automation is the key to success. Number three is remembering to protect your downside. And we didn't spend any time on this today, but we spend a fair amount of time on this in the book. And one of my favorite stories is I worked with this engineer, and I want to give her full credit because her name's Lori, and Lori talked about how they build highways. And she said the first thing they do is they go to a whiteboard and they look at everything that could go wrong with the highway. Everything could go wrong. And then they look at all of those possibilities and they try to eliminate them. And they know well and good that they're not going to be able to eliminate all those things, Brian, but they at least know that they might happen and they protect as much of their downside as they can. And I feel like, especially when we're struggling, that's where we cut.
Yeah.
Like we raise the deductible on the car insurance and then we have a car wreck and then we go into credit card debt because of that, or we skimp on or don't have renter's insurance and then something happens there. So I feel like focusing on that foundation first and some of the non-sexy stuff and protecting our downside before we build would be the third thing.
I love all three of those. We didn't talk about that beforehand, so I didn't know where you would go, but I think you're spot on. Number one being behavioral.
Yes.
Because, that's one of those things where we get in our own way of creating wealth and being successful, whether it's somebody telling you can't do it, because there's a lot of people who do that, or making excuses on why not to start that first day of investing. Number two, make it automatic for the people. I love that, because that's automation can be better than discipline if you make it where essentially you can't fail if you're making this automatic. And then third, this is one we always talk about: don't run up the scoreboard, protect the downside, because we focus, and look, we know we're aspirational where we're focusing on building wealth, but there's a key component, and Joe nailed it. You have to also focus on keeping wealth, because I think a lot of people, and you see it right now with interest rates so low, people are getting pushed so far out on the risk spectrum that they don't, especially if you're in retirement, don't just assume those trees are always going to grow to heaven. So you do need to protect the downside. That's such great advice. That's brilliant. Now, Joe, I want to make sure that I set everybody up to know how to continue to follow you, as well as to run out there and get Stack, because Stack gets released on December 28th. Is that correct?
December 28th, yeah.
So we're still in the pre-order phase. Let me make sure, because I set up all this stuff. So here's all Joe's contact information if you want to follow him on Twitter.
Look at that guy.
If you want to go to the websites, you can see Stacking Benjamins. But what we're here for specifically today is you do have a book coming out that you've co-written with Emily Guy Birkin. And like I said, I've had a chance to go through this. I want to encourage, whether you're a beginner or whether you've done a pretty deep dive, go check out Stacked. And we had a whole conversation. I think this is important because we're content creators. and you were talking about how important it is to get and help people on the front end. What did you mean by that with these pre-orders versus waiting till it comes out?
Yeah, I will be. And thank you for saying so many nice things about the book today. And it was really fun to write. And Emily's a great co-author. We really got a lot out of it. But what we are hoping for, I'm going to be okay if people don't buy my book. I will be all right. I mean, I know that's not a good sales pitch, but there's a lot of people out there that won't be if they don't buy. Right. If it's not this book, if they don't listen to the Money Guy show, or they don't pick up, and different people learn different ways. So what I never knew before I was a creator is if there is a brand or a creator or somebody out there that you really like their stuff, pre-ordering it, I never knew this before, really helps amplify the messaging so we can bring more people along for the ride with us, which is your goal. It's my goal, is to widen this community, because I do better when all the people around me do better.
Yeah.
So the way these charts work is they're all based on pre-order. So on December 28th, based on the number of people that pre-ordered, we'll hit the chart at X number on that day, which is kind of baloney in some ways, but it is what it is. So, but if you pre-order the book, and we throw in some pre-order incentives. Mm-hmm. We give you some budgeting worksheets. We've got Emily has some cool stuff that's in the book, a Tetris sheet to kind of gamify your budget as well. She also has her spreadsheet that she uses. We have a video about the making of the book, the behind the scenes for the real Stacking Benjamins nerds that want to know how we made the book, and some funny stories about stuff that happened while we made the book. But on the day that the book comes out, Amazon, maybe, or the next bigger one was the Wall Street Journal list. Maybe we make a good number on the Wall Street Journal list, and somebody just happens to be looking at the Wall Street Journal and they see this book, and then they recommend it to somebody because they saw, or God forbid, we make the New York Times bestseller list. But if you like anybody's stuff, pre-ordering it is way more important than I ever thought. I never pre-ordered anything before I was an author. In the last 6 months, I've been pre-ordering.
Where do you want people to buy this if you had your wethers about it? Where is there a source that you would prefer people to go check out?
I love personally buying from your local bookseller.
Okay.
I started off with that story about Powell's, one of the biggest independent booksellers in the nation, and I just think it's a great place it's a great place to go. And if we don't support those local places in our communities, they're going to disappear, right? Yeah. So go in there and ask them for Stacked. We have a list, by the way. There's an organization called Bookshop, which if you go to our website, stackingbenjamins.com, and go to /stacked, you'll see all the different places. But if you click the Bookshop link, that's an independent association of local booksellers, and they will help you get it from your local bookstore.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
So it also helps kind of build the grassroots underneath as well, because I'm sure that creates some demand and connects you with the people. So that's awesome. Well, I'm going to continue. Look, if you want to know who I try to grab a drink with whenever I'm at conferences, you've met Joe. I appreciate him coming on. Hey, look, I don't do a lot of interviews, and you're the Mr. MC, so we made it through this thing, and I appreciate it. But definitely go check it out, guys. I'm your host, Brian Preston. Thank you.
I'm Bo.
We got Mr. Joe Saul-Sehy. We'll be talking to you soon. Money Guy team out.